Fortunate today is a gorgeous day. We could be outside. The nice thing about QCS is as winter comes, it doesn't really matter. You can use it inside too because it's not toxic. The vapors and the smell, though you want a little bit of airflow, they're not gonna harm you the way that a lot of the other products can. So it's really nice for that reason, that if you're someone who's refinishing kind of out of your home, you're either a hobbyist or maybe you're a professional, but you just sort of work out of your house. That's great because you can now work all year round if you struggle to do that before. But when it's nice outside, there is nothing better than being outside and enjoying a beautiful day. So now I'm just gonna clean up all this excess residue before I go into that final cleaning. And for that, I'm probably going to use some fresh QCS instead of the dirty dipping cup here. I'm gonna use some fresh, clean stuff just to not spread more dirt around or more of the old finish, but kind of use fresh stuff to get it nice and clean. Again, if any of you have ever restored a George Nelson piece with these legs, you know that you'd be taking a sander, you'd be grinding and grinding. You know, you might put some paste stripper on and do it that way too. But what's so nice about this is you just save all the character, all the little things. So when you're restoring it, it just gives it that authentic feel. It doesn't feel like it was, a reproduction. It feels like, hey, this is an authentic piece with a story. And this allows you to sort of save all these little dents and dings and keep that as part of the legacy of the piece. When you're doing a piece like this is kind of a collectible item. This is one where you really want to honor it with a restoration. We have a lot of people that who use QCS, who love painting furniture. I am not an anti-painter, but I would be in this case. I would have a problem if I saw someone painting a really nice George Nelson cabinet like this, because it is such a nice mid-century item. There's a lot of pieces out there where painting is such a nice way to freshen it up and give it a new life. This piece just needs to go back to what it should be. I see a lot of arguments on the internet about painting and not painting, and I say, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just accept that there's really not a right or wrong? There's just different scenarios, and each one we just need to use our best judgment and do what is right for that particular item. But also it's, personal preference. So this piece is going to get restored back to an original condition so that it looks like like the manufacturer and the designer had intended. All right, so now that is pretty clean. It's pretty much down. You can still see that there's some areas. What I'm gonna do now is I'm going to put some fresh stuff, some fresh QCS onto, I'm gonna use that instead of the old. I'm just gonna use up the rest of my bottle here. So that's one bottle. I'm gonna use one of these sponges. We'll go with that for a minute. Sponges work really nice too because they kind of absorb in the QCS and allows you to sort of scrub. You can also use the pad side. Clean up the bottom here. The one nice thing about Brillo pads over steel wool is that you don't get the steel wool fibers. That's one of the complaints that some people will mention to us as they're seeing our videos. They say, oh, I don't like using steel wool because it's, the fibers and gets stuck in the wood and makes a mess of things. And that's true. It can make a little bit of a mess sometimes, but I just find that steel wool tends to be a little bit more effective. I don't know, I think because it's a finer weave on it that it kind of holds the liquid better, but and this leg is just about done. Again, we can do a little bit of fine sanding later, but this is going to get us to where we are very close to being all set to go. On these, I would avoid sanding them very much at all because then you can preserve that color. I would just lightly sand them. I would avoid trying to get them to be perfect. I would leave some of the character and leave that so that it doesn't cut through the dyed color from the factory. All right, that looks pretty good. A little bit in here where the screws are. Again, we could have taken the legs off. That's totally an option. I just opted to leave them on. One plus is if you wanted to preserve that overspray that was from the factory and kind of preserve that look, if you just to kind of give it a more original vibe. You could take the legs off, do them, and then put them back in where the shadow is, and you would have that original shadow of overspray that would give you an original look. But you very rarely see the bottoms of these pieces, and if it's restored right, it should look very similar. Usually if you come back to an area and it has had a little time to dry, you'll see where there's still finish is like a little glossier. There's just a little more build, you can kind of see it. But the natural raw areas are nice and dull. That's kind of one way to tell. All right, let's take this now and dry it off. And again, remember that, you know, it does have sort of an oily appearance at first, so you got to give it some time to dry before you judge it fully. Because sometimes it'll look like, oh, there's still finish on there, it's shiny, but it's actually just the QCS still wet. And you could take a little heat gun if you wanted to, and you could potentially warm up the area if you wanted to accelerate the drying time. But otherwise, just giving it time in the air on a nice day like today, or even inside, just let it dry overnight, maybe a day or two, depending on how much saturation you had to do. All right, I think that is about it. What I want to do now is just I'm gonna crack open a fresh bottle only because I want to do a little bit of just final cleanup. So I'm going to spray a little bit on some cloth and wipe it, but I'm going to use very little of that. If I would have thought about it, I could have budgeted more of the original bottle. But you could see that after stripping all of this, I have, you know, that much left. So this has taken pretty much a bottle to do. And for a great piece like this, to get a nice clean strip, it's going to save you time later. That's worth it to me anyway. 23 years that I've restored furniture. Sometimes you spend more to have a better process and a better outcome. And for me, that's absolutely worth it, especially the health aspect. So we're gonna call this one done. I'm just gonna go over the legs with a little cleaning rag like I did on the side just to get that final residue off. But other than that, this is pretty much good to go. Let it dry and move along.